Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily. That's what we're calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We're using the Johnson edition to do it, and we're looking now at poem 193. I shall know why when time is over. In some ways, we're back to poems 70, 79, and 85. This is one of the 14 poems that was selected by T.W. Higginson for publishing in the Christian Union of 25 September 1890. We've mentioned several other poems that were included in that 14. The question of this poem is a simple one. Does human suffering have meaning? And if so, what kind of meaning? Now, obviously, this is the question of theodicy, Theodicy. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff already at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you have already studied our set of introductory comments where we comment on what we call in 303 our Big Five: epistemology, what you can know; ontology, who you are; psychology, the study of the individual mind; sociology, the study of the group mind and actions; and then finally, that word we just used, theodicy. The question is a why question. Why must there be pain? Why must there be suffering in a world especially created by an all-powerful, all-loving deity? And of course, Milton's Paradise Lost, we've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. Milton will be playing around with that question. Emily will definitely pick that question up, and I think there is quite a bit of Milton buried in this poem. Now, I'm hopeful as well, we're assuming that you've already read the previous 192 poems. We just finished with poem 192, Poor Little Heart. In some ways, though, this poem speaks powerfully to Emily's longing, dare we say it, her demanding that there be some answer to the pain in the world. Obviously, we think of the book of Job in the Hebrew Bible. Here, she'll call it a drop of anguish. It's the question of the agonizing cry of why? Why must there be this pain and suffering? Now, many have seen this poem associated with 192. They do go together, there's no question. It is an interesting thing that Emily's sister Vinnie once said, quote, Emily had to think. She was the only one of us who had to do that. The suggestion is that while everybody else was doing their domesticated labors, it was Emily who was given the challenge, the cross to bear, some will call it, of having to think through the tough questions. Notice the opening line, I shall know why, not I hope to know why, or I may know why. In other words, I will know. And I think this is, there's a defiance in her voice here that's quite compelling. Also, I would challenge you to listen to all the S sounds of this performance. I shall know why when time is over and I have ceased to wonder why. Christ will explain each separate anguish in the fair schoolroom of the sky. He will tell me what Peter promised, and I, for wonder at his woe, I shall forget the drop of anguish that scalds me now. That scalds me now. Now, of course, the exclamation point, to put a fine point on the end of this one, and the use of the word scalds immediately starts to make us think about what exactly it is that Emily is playing at here. By the way, scalds only gets used one time in all of her poetry, and it's here. Notice how she begins. I shall know why. So we begin with epistemology, what one can know. In other words, in the very moment when she says, when time is over, notice capitalized for time, she is suggesting right away that she won't know the answer to this question until she dies. Well, note the irony. What's the point of a theodicy that will explain why there must be pain and suffering after one has left the very world where there is this woe, to use the language she uses in, of course, Milton's Paradise Lost. And she says, I'll know I have ceased to wonder why. Of course, this is death, right? The cessation. And she uses the word wonder twice here, so she'll be able to return to it. Notice the repetition of the word why. When bad things happen, we have already said that this is Emily's fundamental theodicy. We have a tendency to ask, why did this happen to me? Emily will in fact invert and change the language to why did this happen for me. But the way that she gets there is going to be compelling through our study of all these poems. Notice, I shall know why when time is over, and I've ceased to wonder why. Christ will explain each separate anguish. Now notice, we go from the father of poem 191, and of course other poems like 70 as well, to now Christ. Christ will explain each separate anguish. Notice anguish, first of all, is not capitalized. Secondly, when it's used, drop of anguish is capitalized. Each separate anguish. Notice, in other words, it's like one after another after another. The specific anguish, of course, we don't know what stands behind this. Is it the loss of a pal to death, or the loss of a friendship? Is it something specifically that has to do with maybe Sue or with Sam Boyles? We've commented on this already. Notice, though, Christ will explain each separate anguish. In the fair, it's interesting she would use that word fair, schoolroom of the sky. Now, there's been some connections here made to some of Emily's instructors and teachers and mentors. But Emily, as we've said in our introductory set of comments, can be understood as a teacher, as a pedagogue, as one who is looking for information, and here, of course, as student. She wants desperately to understand what's going on, right? Now, of course, this idea of the sky takes us back to poem 191 with the skies can't keep their secret, right? He, Christ, will tell me what Peter promised. Now, of course, this is the referencing to Peter and the denial that Peter will deny Christ when Christ prophesies that, in fact, he will do. You'll remember this from Matthew 26, 24 to 35, and Mark 14, 29 to 31, as well as 66 to 72. It isn't altogether clear what she's referencing, though, that Peter promised. In other words, he promised that he would never deny Christ. This seems to suggest the act of betrayal. Somehow maybe Emily was betrayed, and I, for wonder at his woe. Well, you'll remember the opening lines of Milton's Paradise Lost, of man's first disobedience, and the fruit of that forbidden tree, which mortal taste brought death into the world, and all our woe. Now you'll remember a few lines later that he says that the whole point of Paradise Lost is to justify the ways of God to men. The Odyssey. We've given full lectures on Paradise Lost at learnstrong.net, and you may want to go back and revisit it. And I, for wonder at his woe, I shall forget. Now we're back to I shall know. Now it's I shall forget. I shall forget the drop of anguish. And again, anguish here capitalized, and notice it is a drop. It is interesting that we go from separate to drop. It is interesting that Emily will capitalize anguish, and it is interesting that she says, I will someday get to the bottom of this. I have to get to the bottom of this. I want to know what's going on. I'll forget the drop of anguish that scalds me now. Now, many have read this as her dissatisfaction with traditional religious answers as to the question, why must there be pain and suffering and death or betrayal in this world? It scalds me now. It scalds me now. Notice again, there is this immediacy. It is happening right now. By the way, notice how we do have interesting rhyme scheme. Notice why, sky. But then we've got woe now. It's as if she is intentionally not rhyming because she's pointing out the specifics of what's wrong with this project that we will call living in this world where there is pain and suffering. It may be altogether as well an attempt to say, Milton didn't give me a good enough answer with the whole thing of the fruit of the forbidden tree that brought woe into the world. At 2a, I think the primary message here is that sometimes, for Emily, there is no answer for the pain, the betrayal, the anguish, that drop of anguish that we experience in our life. And there's no clean answer here outside of our own ability to interpret it by asking the question, why did this happen for me? So, for example, Emily's pain, her betrayal, her sorrow, her suffering leads to brilliant poems like this that will mirror so often our own feelings of asking, why? Why must it be this way? At 2b, well, I love her word choice. I love the power of the S sounds, those hard sibilant sounds in this poem. At 3a, well, of course we'll think of Dante's Divine Commedia, no question. But I want to take us to a couple of other poems. We will, in 376, we will come back to this poem when we meet 376. Of course I prayed. And did God care? He cared as much as on the air a bird had stamped her foot and cried, give me my reason, life I had not had. But for yourself, 'twere better charity to leave me in the atom's tune, merry and naught and gay and numb, than this smart misery. Notice smart misery as opposed to a drop of anguish. And when we meet poem 502, again we'll come back to this poem. At least to pray is left. Notice the repetition just like in this poem. Oh, Jesus in the air. Notice it's Jesus and not Christ. I know not which thy chamber is. I'm knocking everywhere. Thou settest earthquake in the south and maelstrom in the sea. Say, Jesus Christ of Nazareth, hast thou no arm for me? It's a powerful accusation to traditional theology that she was raised with. Finally, at 3b, how do you deal with that drop of anguish? How do you deal with the challenges of the theodicy question? And is a poem like this helpful for you at all to mirror your own sometimes anger? I hope so. Thank you.